Let's talk about Taiwan
and the Taiwan Strait. Because for the last few years, these waters haven't exactly been calm.
This is unprecedented. In the air and at sea, Taiwan is surrounded.
12 Chinese fighter jets crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait.
With Taiwan caught in a kind of tug of war between the US and China, there are fears about where this could all end up.
Of course, that's the million-dollar question that everyone wants to know.
So why is Taiwan such a flashpoint between two of the world's biggest powers? Taiwan is an island stuck in a kind of political limbo. It's a democratic, self-governing territory. Just over the water is China, which claims Taiwan as its own, but many Taiwanese take issue with that. Then you add in the US, which has taken on the role of neighborhood cop, and you end up with Taiwan as the focus for many big competing interests. But to understand how we got here, you have to know the backstory. Taiwan was ruled by Imperial China for 200 years. Then Japan had it for 50 years after winning a war against China. But when Japan lost in World War II, China, one of the victors, got Taiwan back again. Then you had the Chinese Civil War. Mao Zedong's communist forces took over the mainland, while the other side, the nationalist forces of Chiang Kai-shek, escaped to Taiwan. So in 1949, China sort of split in two, and you had two rival governments, one in Taiwan, one in Beijing, both claiming they were the true government of China. The side in Taiwan was known as the Republic of China, the ROC, and that's still the island's official name today. And on the mainland, the Communist Party declared a brand new Chinese state, the People's Republic of China, PRC for short. Now remember, the US wasn't exactly a fan of communism. And so it was the ROC in Taiwan that mostly got the international recognition, including a seat at the UN. But by the 1970s, that seat didn't really make sense anymore. The UN passed a resolution confirming the representatives from the PRC as the only lawful representatives of China to the United Nations. And so the ROC was out.
We are being deserted. We are being forsaken.
So what does all this mean for Taiwan's political status today? Well, it leaves it in that limbo we talked about at the beginning. Now, from Beijing's perspective, it's pretty clear. China is one country and Taiwan is part of it. Right now, the island governs itself, but Beijing's position is that eventually it'll be reunited with the mainland.
实现祖国完全统一，是全体中华儿女的共同愿望。
So what about Taiwan's status according to Taiwan?
Well, it depends who's in power. Over the years, political parties have taken different positions. Some have been slightly more pro-China. Others have been more pro-independence. But even those parties have been careful about explicitly pushing for full sovereignty. Most have preferred to kind of fudge it, because that's what the Taiwanese people seem to prefer.
If we consider what exactly this political spectrum that Taiwanese voters place themselves on, we have one long line where on one end you have immediate unification with the PRC, and on the other end you have immediate independence as the Republic of Taiwan. And in the middle, you have what we describe as the status quo. And we know from decades of public opinion research that Taiwanese voters do not want either extreme. The majority of Taiwanese voters want the status quo. Taiwanese people don't love this very awkward gray zone that they exist in, but it's a choice of pragmatism where they know that any radical change could lead to war, and Taiwanese voters do not want war.
Okay, so what about the US? Well, their position is also a bit of a fudge. It even has an official name, strategic ambiguity. On the one hand, they do acknowledge that Taiwan is a part of China and not an independent country. There's no official US embassy in Taipei, for example. But on the other hand, they sort of want China to leave Taiwan alone.
And one form of deterrence is making sure Taiwan is well armed. The US already sells Taiwan a lot of weapons and recently gave $80 million in military aid.
What the United States rejects is either side unilaterally changing the status quo. On one hand, it tells Taiwan that If it unilaterally declares independence, the United States is less likely to support Taiwan if the PRC attacks. On the other hand, if the PRC attacks Taiwan unprovoked, then the United States is very likely to defend Taiwan because that's the PRC unilaterally changing the status quo.
When Donald Trump was in power, he got cozier with Taiwan than previous US presidents. Some argue President Biden has gone even further. At times, he seems to have been pretty unambiguous about backing Taiwan.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes,
You are.
that's the commitment we made.
China condemned that comment, and Biden said later that it didn't represent any actual change of that US policy of strategic ambiguity. But things escalated again when then US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan.
The most senior US politician to visit Taiwan in 25 years.
An American this senior on this soil is provocative.
Across the narrow Taiwan Strait, China responded, announcing new live-fire military drills encircling Taiwan.
There's definitely been a change in the nature of PRC threats towards Taiwan ever since Nancy Pelosi's visit here. The quantity of fighter jets that fly into Taiwan's air defense identification zone has increased drastically. They now pass the so-called median line between Taiwan and the PRC. And they're starting to use way more serious fighter jets that could really do damage if they were to enter into a conflict.
So that's the big picture. If things spin out of control, we could potentially be talking about a war between the US and China. It means that when things are tense around Taiwan, it's a big deal.
It's also why a lot of people will be watching Taiwan in 2024. In January, Taiwanese voters will elect a new president who will help determine the next chapter in how it deals with China. But some argue the US presidential election in November is the one that will really set the tone.
I think we actually need to wait till after the November election in the United States to really understand what the meaning is for Taiwan's next president, because how the Taiwan relationship with the United States will change if Donald Trump, for example, is reelected, I think is going to be radically different than how Taiwan's relationship is under Joe Biden.